How did it affect Philip's life plan?
Well, Philip had already made a trip to Crosbyton to check about renting some places, and he was telling me, you know how cheap you can rent a house there, because the economy was very slow there, and they could get a house to stay in for $150, and then they wouldn't have to be under Joe's supervision 24 hours a day. It's kind of nice to get away from the boss a little bit, you know, when you're a teenager. Not that my boys are wild or not, but it's always nice to. So they were, and then my son was thinking about getting married, and which he is married now and has a little baby, and he and his bride talked about moving up there, and they talked about even maybe moving on up to Montana later on. But Philip had spent 4 years spending a lot of time on paleontology. Everything that came up, he paid attention to it. He studied about it. He had a complete set of tools. He had his own dinosaur digging trailer. He had all the tools that I had, plus all that he had managed to collect together. And he had actually purchased and gotten bones from other sites other than where we were working. People knew him and knew that he liked fossils, and people were always bringing things to him. And then he was stopping by rock shops and collecting things that other people had found that they didn't know what it was, or things that interested him. And so a large collection of things that I have here at the house and he has at home was what Philip put together. And in fact, it's a display all its own, where he can go and he'll be talking to kids about creation and what the Bible did and what happened in Genesis and what happened about the flood. Philip has a full set of replicas and copies that he purchased from Joe and that he made while he worked for Joe, so that he could talk to youth groups.
So he was going to be a paleontologist then?
Yes, he wanted to firmly put down this idea about evolution. He'd already had a couple classes in college where his biology professors were avid evolutionists, and he was always asking me, he said, Dad, do I thump this guy now, or do I go through the class? And I said, well, you know, he is the teacher. I said, I'd suggest you know what you know, and you go to that class and you learn what he wants you to know, because you're paying him, he's not paying you. And then ask appropriate questions. Your job's not to thump the professor. Your job is to learn what he knows and learn how he thinks. And maybe that'll give you an inroad of how to learn more, because I said you'll probably learn more from him than you will from a creation book, because you're learning how the enemy thinks. And you might find that he has some things that you need to work on. We need to find what it takes to convince people. So I said, no, you don't thump the professor, you learn from the professor.
Now, how did the betrayal of Joe Taylor affect Philip and his life plan?
What Philip did is he, you know, it really affected his faith. You know, we put too much importance, and I stress to the boys, you know, people will fail you. And there'll be even times that maybe your father won't come through the way you want him to come through. And that this is a walk of faith. And that there'll be people who will steal, who will lie, who will cheat. And I just expressed to Philip that Philip just became super critical of everybody's motives. And you know, I guess it happens to all of us when we're young. There's something that comes along and just kind of hits us between the eyes, and it slows us down. We realize we don't have all the answers. And I'd like to think it came at a bad time, but maybe it came at the right time. But yeah, it's affected him. I don't think that he'll be a paleontologist. He talks about it now, but it's in a past tense. It's certainly not the fervor that he had before. And yeah, we had talked about taking an old iron lung and making our own hyperbaric biosphere here at the house. And he was designing some experiments to go in it to see if in fact these conditions are met, will in fact plants grow like they did before. All talk about that. It's just, I don't think I've heard anything about that since. It knocked his zeal for that.
And your boys really loved and respected Joe, didn't they?
Oh, they still do. They saw a weakness, and they realized that perhaps Joe wasn't the one that could do it. You know, the enemy was ruthless, and Joe wasn't.